Now, one of the games that has recently piqued my interest is, of course, Robocop Rogue City.
Guys, we've got company. Anyone expecting a silver freak?
Drop it, scum.
It may just be nostalgia talking, but I think that game is absolutely fantastic. I think the developers have done a great job on it, particularly in not ruining the original concept of the movies. I do remember the original movies, they were absolutely great, particularly 1 and 2, not so much number 3. If anybody's actually watched them, they'll know what I'm talking about. And I think the developers of the game did a great job in bringing it to life as a game adaptation. There have been Robocop games in the past and they're pretty retro nowadays, mostly side scrollers, so it was really good to have this breath of fresh air brought to the franchise in the form of this game. Now, I've been playing this game at home on my personal system, and that's a pretty beefy system, so it plays beautifully fine on pretty much any setting that you can configure it to. But when I was actually checking out this game's requirements, I noticed that its minimum requirements isn't a lot at all. Now, that is quite surprising at the moment because a lot of new game releases are asking for ridiculous amounts of hardware, even just to get the minimum specs, but not this one. This one is only asking for an older 4th generation i7 processor, very common, and pretty much everybody's either had one or they've still got one, as well as an older graphics card in the form of the AMD Radeon RX 480. Now, the RX 400 series are slowly going out of support, but they were very common and a lot of people had them. So of course I needed to see what kind of experience you would get in this game with that minimum requirement. So for our little test today, we've actually got the components. They are sitting on our test bench, which is pretty cool to be honest. And we've actually got a little mini ITX board here, so that's pretty cool. For the CPU, we've got the i7-4790. That is specified as their minimum requirements for this, and they're very common nowadays. You can pick them up really, really cheap. For the graphics card, we've of course got our reference model AMD Radeon RX 480. This is the 8GB model, even though they do only specify the 4GB model, but this is the only one we've got, and power to power, it should be very similar to be honest. It may actually perform slightly better, particularly if we have high textures, but I don't know if we're really going to get that far with this one. But we've got the game installed, and I suppose what we need to do now is just crack the game open and see if it even loads. Now, the game is loaded up and it was actually pretty quick. I was expecting it to be a lot slower than this, particularly with the system that we've got. It is considered reasonably old now, and we do have 16GB of DDR3, but it's not the fastest in the world. It meets their minimum requirements, but that's about it really. You probably wouldn't want to be using this speed memory nowadays in particularly modern games, but of course this game has loaded up. We'll just drop over into our settings and we'll see what we're actually configured to. I can already feel there's a slight delay on the mouse here. I'm not sure what's going on, but it doesn't move when you move, so maybe there is a setting for that. We'll double check in a minute. But when it comes to video quality, we're currently running in 1080p. We're going to do all of our testing in 1080p today. We're not really going to change that. I don't think you should have to go any lower to actually play a game, but maybe by minimum requirements, that's what they mean. Maybe we need a 720p gaming experience. I don't know, but let's have a look down at what else we've got configured. We of course got our VSync turned off. And if we go down to our graphics settings, we are currently running in a high preset. I think we'll start from there and then we'll start lowering things to see how we can get the game playable. Now that we're in game, we can see that the game actually looks pretty decent. I don't think there's any quality issues here at all. It looks just as good as it does on my own system, to be honest. We've got another little character there. They look pretty good, but we'll wander around and we'll see what we can kill, I suppose, because that's generally what you do in this game. Everything is running reasonably smooth at the moment. We are getting an average frames per second of only 32 with a 1% low of 27. It's not shockingly terrible compared to the hardware that we've got and the game it is, but actually, to be honest, things are running quite smooth at the moment. I think what we'll do there is we'll find some action because at the moment nothing is really happening, but we'll breach these doors and see what happens. As we can see, our 1% low suddenly dropped a lot and we are in slow motion now. See if we can kill all these people and see if things start to speed up. So our 1% low now has dropped to 17 FPS and our average is still actually sitting at around 29. To be honest, that could be considered as a minimum requirement playing experience, but we want to see if we can do a little bit better than that. Let's drop back into the settings and we'll start lowering things as we need to. First thing we'll do is we'll drop this graphics quality down to medium. That's probably the first thing that we could do, possibly. According to these settings, we do have access or could have access to an upscaling technology, but we're not going to touch that yet. Let's just get back into the game, see if we've improved anything with those medium settings. Now, looking at the actual quality of the screen, I can't really tell what has changed. It does look just as good to me, particularly on this monitor, but we unfortunately haven't actually gained anything in our performance. We are still currently getting an average of 31 frames per second. with a 1% low of 23. I suppose that is slightly higher than the 17 we were getting a minute ago, and there is a lot of stuff happening on the screen, so maybe it has improved the 1% lows just a little bit, but would we consider that playable yet? Maybe not. Let's see if we can aim for a 30 FPS low 1% lows. Jumping back into the settings, what we'll do is we'll actually drop the quality down to low. I'm not sure if that's really going to impact our graphical quality much, but I suppose we'll see once we're in the game. Now, our average FPS hasn't really gained that much. It's currently running at 34 frames per second with a 1% low of 29. We are getting closer to that 30 FPS 1% lows. The game still actually looks pretty good. I can't really tell that much has really changed on the quality here. It's as if it hasn't even really loaded. So let's just double check back at the options, make sure it's actually saved. And according to this, it has actually saved. Everything is pretty much set to low here, so I can't really tell what's going on more than anything. It looks pretty good. Low settings looks just as good as medium settings, and medium settings looks near enough as good as high settings, but I think the game is reasonably playable at the moment. We still haven't hit that 30 FPS that we really want to hit, so let's drop back into the settings and see what else we can tweak. Now, going down to upscaling technology, what we'll do is we'll switch that on to AMD's FSR 2.2, and we will set it to a not ultra performance, balanced. We'll set it to a balanced setting, and we'll see if that actually improved things. So as we can see, that has actually greatly improved our FPS here. We're currently running at an average of 47 frames per second with a 1% low of 41. That means that we have hit our target of 30 FPS on the 1% lows. And even with this action happening here, it's not dropping in that much. Picture quality has degraded slightly. We can actually see that it's as if AA has turned itself off. We've got some jagged edges, we've got things not rendering 100%, but that's what you kind of expect when using an upscaling technology anyway. Would I consider this as actually still playable though? I think we would, to be honest. It is playable, you can get away with it. I think obviously they have set a decent kind of minimum hardware requirement here, because this is actually playing perfectly fine. Could you play the game all the way through on these kind of settings? You probably could. I don't know what happens once the levels start to get bigger. We are in an enclosed space at the moment. Maybe a bigger opening space would actually cause us some issues, but let's see what it would take to actually get us up to that 60. I'm pretty sure at this point what we're going to have to do is drop the resolution. We'll see what happens when we do. We'll drop it down to a 720p. We'll turn off the upscaling for now, and we'll see what it actually performs like. Now, for 720p, I'm going to actually increase the graphics quality to medium here. We don't want it to look too bad, so we'll see what the game looks like. Now, you can clearly see in the quality of the picture that it is a 720p picture. We're not upscaling now, we've turned that off, but to be honest, it actually is more than playable. We are playing on a big screen here, or at least I am, and I can see a big screen, so everything looks a little bit more blurry than if you were on a small screen, but I think most people will be running a screen like me. This is a 27-inch monitor, and most people will be using that nowadays. So you could get away with playing it on this. We haven't still hit our 60 FPS target. We are running at around 50 FPS on average. So actually dropping the resolution and increasing to that medium preset hasn't really changed a lot from running it in 1080p with some upscaling. Of course, you wouldn't expect it to, considering that it is rendering with upscaling a lot lower. But we'll drop over back to the settings and we'll see what happens if we actually drop things down. Will this game get to 60 FPS? Will it actually look any decent, or is it going to look terrible? I suppose the only way we can find out is if we turn some things on. What I will do is turn upscaling on, this time with a quality setting, just to give us a little bit of help. And of course, this means that the game will be rendering at a lot lower resolution. I wouldn't recommend ever running a game in 720p and then also upscaling. I'm suspecting it's going to look terrible, but let's jump into game and see what happens. So we've got this now configured with a 720p resolution, as well as an upscaling AMD FSR 2.2 set to a quality setting, and with a low preset. And to be honest, the game doesn't look even that bad at all. You could get away with playing this. I think the graphically quality of this game looks still good. You can get away with it. And we of course have hit our magic target now of 60 FPS. So that's exactly what it's going to be able to take to get this game to run at 60 FPS. You're going to have to drop everything all the way down, but maybe that's what they mean when they talk about minimum requirements. I think you could actually get away with playing this game on these settings. It is actually great to see a games developer supporting such hardware like this. It's things that are pretty much going out of support. The CPU, of course, is well out of support nowadays. The graphics card itself, the RX 480, is going out of support. They've actually slowed it down. They are still getting driver updates, but they're much slower than they usually are. I suspect we won't see any game-specific driver updates for the Radeon RX 480 anymore, but does that really matter if it's going to be able to play games like this? Of course, you are very limited on the latest and greatest, particularly those ones that have really high requirements, but it's good to know that developers are still supporting it with games like this. I'm not 100% sure what you guys think about this, but I'm actually reasonably happy with the way that this has turned out. This kind of system can be put together for very minimal effort. We recently built a system using this graphics card, not necessarily this CPU, but it was one very similar, and we didn't spend a lot on it at all. It was around 150, 160 pounds. So considering that you can still put together a system for that kind of price, if you look around and do a bit of shopping and get some deals, you can still play some of the latest games like this. Let me know in the comments below what you think about this. Have you actually played Robocop Rogue City, and what do you think of the game? I think it's fantastic. I'm not quite sure if it's everybody's kind of cup of tea, but for people of my age, particularly with the nostalgic effect of the movies and the original movies anyway, not the third one, let's not consider that one at all. It's a great playing experience. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel if you like this kind of content, and I'm sure as always we'll catch you guys in the next one.